Hello, 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 hello. You are here. Welcome to Radio Free Wall Street. Have I got an incredible story for you? Have we put together the pieces? Have it finally fell into place, and we know exactly what went on. We have been following, obviously, the Trump story. We have not been fooled by Fox News telling us that it's a fake thing, fake this, fake bullshit, and all this. We have been astonished as more and more people are coming forward. More and more people from the Trump organization are copping a deal, and more information comes out. But we've had a lot of trouble putting the pieces together. Let me explain to you what it is. The state-of-the-art thinking was that Donald Trump contracted with the Russians to go ahead and begin this elaborate campaign of trolling, okay? That was using social media to find the people, the factory workers, the disenfranchised, the guy who lost his house in the real estate wipeout, the guy who's not making it in his factory job, and finding those people and identifying them. That was part of it. But now, and we know that took place through Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica got the entire Republican and Democratic list. They knew who these people were. They added all the social Facebook media that they're still not fessing up to and profiled these people, and they went after them. They did like campaigns. They did blogospheres. They had what they call 360-degree marketing, where, hey, I'm Louis here in Iowa. How are you? Oh, I love that Donald Trump. You heard about that TPP? Boy, that's a conspiracy, that Trans-Pacific Partnership. Oh, you don't want that. And so then they hear from some guy out of Cleveland. And then there's a church group. And all of a sudden, that 360 marketing is bringing all kinds of people from all places that are reaffirming what they're seeing, and in essence, changing their opinion and changing their belief systems. That's the simple mind. The serious people, that shit doesn't work in. But let's face it, the Donald Trump people are not exactly Einsteins. But the pieces still didn't make any sense. Now, let's look at Manafort. Manafort was Donald Trump's chief campaign manager at the critical time when he ran the campaign, okay? He came in from the convention to the election. And he had huge connections to Russian oligarchs. And he got millions and millions and millions of dollars. In fact, the figure goes to $100 million from the Russians on Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is a very interesting situation. It is the Russians' attempt to rebuild the Soviet Union. It is a source of massive friction between NATO, the Russians, and the Europeans. The Ukraine is very critical because of gas pipelines that take energy and flow it into Europe. Ukraine is also the first land reconquered since World War II by the Soviet Union and taken back with the Crimea Peninsula. Now, as a result of that, the Russians got massive sanctions. As a result of that, Manafort and his gang of merry thieves, were involved in this thing. Now, we had several stories that all of a sudden linked together, and we got the pieces put together. You might remember a story that seemed unrelated to the Trump administration and Trump's problems, but the Ukrainian separatist leader was killed in a Café bombing. Now, this is a guy who is a Russian who is putting together a movement in Ukraine, by the way, a revolutionary movement with force and violence, not just voting, to have the Ukraine go back as part of the Soviet Union. Their argument is that Ukraine is part of the Soviet Union. Most people are Russian speakers, and that's what they want, okay? Now, this rebel got blown up in a cafe, which is where the rebels hanged out, in a rebel section, and it was kind of an astonishing hit, okay? Obviously a professional hit, obviously done very carefully, and we didn't know how it related to things. Now remember, during the campaign, it's settled business that campaign chief Paul Manafort paid senior former European politicians to lobby for the Ukraine, okay? Now Donald Trump has been telling us that it had nothing to do with him, nothing to do with him, nothing to do with him, and we kind of just bought into that, but there was something uneasy about it. We didn't understand how that paid in. Well, what did the Russians want from Donald Trump? Well, they basically wanted the sanctions lifted, and they also wanted to be able to get legitimacy to the move in Ukraine. which Donald Trump brought into. Now, Manafort was the man. Manafort is the guy who came to the Trump campaign bearing Russian gifts. Now, there's another piece of this story that surfaced that, again, was kind of like, well, how is this related? Let me tell you the next piece. The next piece is that it's been established that that the Trump campaign spoke frequently with persons related to Russian intelligence, and that's Rick Gates. And he was the deputy campaign for Donald Trump. And that's when the FBI got their attention about all these Russian communications, okay? Now, the FBI is not free to talk about that just yet, but that will be coming out in the court papers. Now, there's also another situation, and that is that there is a famed meeting at the Manhattan building known as the Drake Hotel. And this is part of the lobbyist of Manafort, and this is part of a Russian businessman that came into the picture. Now, this Russian businessman, he is an oligarch. He's very close to Putin. He's involved in the oil and aluminum business, okay? And this is, again, part of the whole intrigue between the former Ukraine president, which you heard about, Viktor, and his connection with Manafort. But here is where it gets really dicey. It turns out that as this thing moves forward, the Mueller investigation has now got, in the Manafort trial, which came out, details with Ukraine and the Russian money flowing into Donald Trump's campaign. And is basically a longtime business partner of Donald Trump, has detailed how he helped Paul Manafort hide millions of dollars that he earned from his Ukrainian clients. And it turns out that Rick Gates testified that Ukrainian businessmen paid Manafort millions of dollars for his political consulting work. And that was where the campaign money that eventually flowed to Donald Trump came from. Now, singularly, Manafort has been convicted of this campaign money and this fraud and not paying taxes and laundering this vast sums of money in phase one. But the other side of this is what came out in testimony was that money was used by these guys to, guess what, pay for things like Donald Trump's inauguration ball. It was also used for money that was used to fund the campaign. And there's now a trail of money that goes back to Donald Trump's girlfriends paying for silence and all kinds of campaign funds that all works in part of this entire conspiracy. Now, Mueller has made major connection tying secret Ukrainian money to the Trump inauguration party. Let me repeat this again. It turns out that Rick Gates worked with the Russian agents by a guy by the name of Kilmick and a guy by the name of Patton. And they were involved in funding money to Manafort and into the Trump campaign. How do you like that shit? And actual payments made to help fund Donald Trump's inaugural bash has now been proven to come from these Russians, okay? And Patton sought tickets to Trump's inauguration and on behalf of a prominent Ukrainian oligarch. And he acted as the straw purchaser to do it. They say that Ukrainian money was secretly tunneled to the inauguration committee through a Cypriot bank account. Now, all this is a matter of record that is part of what will be revealed in the Mueller investigation. And what's happening is, this was to buy influence with Donald Trump. This was to ensure his loyalty. and this was to receive the United States government support through Donald Trump, the new president, for their journey in Ukraine, okay, to walk on the wild side. Now, what has happened is this all blew apart. And the Café bombing resulted in the death of the very guy who was the Manafort connection through the Trump campaign. But there's more. Remember WikiLeaks? Well, WikiLeaks now has a problem, and that is Julian Assad, who's about to be subpoenaed and indicted, was involved in receiving the information, again fed around the circle from the Russians to WikiLeaks. Remember Donald Trump? I love WikiLeaks, and there's going to be a big thing happening Monday. Remember all that? Well, Donald Trump obviously had foreknowledge. Now, let me show you how dicey that's getting. As the Mueller probe is getting closer to WikiLeaks, the body count keeps mounting, right? And now you've got a WikiLeaks consultant by the name of Aaron Kamekbis, who has disappeared. And he is a key in the connection between the Russians, and he is not to be found anywhere. He has disappeared. Nobody knows where he's been. And you want to know why it's so important? This is the guy that is the Russian link to this whole sort of affair. So now, people are starting to disappear. The bodies are piling up. And all of a sudden, people are putting the connection together. In other words, what Mueller discovered was Manafort wasn't simply just helping Donald Trump get the Russians to interfere in the election. It was a far bigger conspiracy than that. This was about channeling huge amounts of money into the Russian campaign, into the Trump campaign by the Russians. This was about Russia buying influence with Trump, deal's a done deal with those people, to go ahead and allow the Ukraine sanctions to be lifted. You might remember one of the first things Donald Trump, when he went into office, was to have his staff looking at what it would take to lift the Russian sanctions, right? You might remember the next thing was that Donald Trump publicly said that the Ukraine was part of Russia and that he didn't see that being a problem. So now you understand that this is return for services rendered and payment made. And the whole sordid affair is coming out. Now Putin is cleaning up the mess. Putin is removing the people that have any knowledge of this. Putin is covering up their tracks like any KGB officer would do. And he is absolutely livid that this is going to come out when the Mueller investigation is made public. Now, let's say Donald Trump stops the Mueller investigation, which I think he's going to do for sure. Fire the Attorney General, close it up. Well, Mueller is not under any obligation to keep secret this thing, and he will release the sort of details. And the details go back. Remember Manafort and all those guys? Well, basically, they were brought in because of the Russian connections. Their job was to get Donald Trump moving down the road, to give them help they needed with the sanctions, and to go ahead and let them take over the Ukraine. So the Mueller investigation is now onto that. That is why they're getting ready to indict WikiLeaks editor Julian Assad. That is why the connection to Manafort met his demise this week as Mueller was convicted, and as the Mueller campaign connection became part of the court record. And that is why everybody's scared shit. And that is why Mueller tying the connection of secret Ukrainian money to the Trump inauguration is just a start. In other words, it wasn't just the inauguration. It was a Trump campaign. It was the WikiLeaks. It was the troll farming. In other words, it was a one-stop shop that was there to provide cash, influence, information, campaign help to get Donald Trump elected. Why? Because Donald Trump was going to give the Russians what they wanted, and that was lifting sanctions and free to go into the Ukraine. Now, let me explain something to you. Have you wondered how Donald Trump is so anti-NATO? Got to pay their bill. NATO doesn't count. Well, NATO is woefully inadequate to take on the Russians in Europe. The former European states, all of them, and I've talked to many people from those places, are living in the nightmare that Donald Trump will sell them out and do nothing when the Russians come marching in. They are making great inroads and strides as we speak, pushing their influence. They're building military bases, getting ready for war. Poland is seeing a huge buildup of Russian troops and tanks. Russian bases are popping up all over the place. And they're doing that because Donald Trump's their friend. And Donald Trump is not going to engage them. Okay? Have you heard Donald Trump say anything bad about Putin? He's attacked the Canadians, he's attacked the French, he's attacked our allies, but not them. Now, the DPR leader was the important link to Manafort. Huge amount of money was funneled to him from Manafort even during the Trump campaign to make this thing all work. That's why the prosecutors spent so much time about the tax filings, the accounting, to see where all this money went. Now, the smoking gun is, the money did go into the Trump campaign. Donald Trump directed those funds and used it. And there has now been established in the first trial, through Rick Gates, the establishment of the Ukrainian money that went into Manafort, the Russian ties with that money, and the fact that, yes, it did go into the Trump campaign. So what you've got is a situation that there's a history between Trump and Russia. Manafort was one of the guys that made that all work. And this is now all about the natural gas trade. Okay, you understand that the people involved, the oligarchs, are the ones that have a grand vision of Russia completely dominating Europe. And one of the Trojan horses they're using is natural gas. There is the Nord Stream pipeline that runs from Russia directly to Germany. Okay, Donald Trump has not made natural gas supplies available from the United States in abundance. It's a very small percentage going to Europe. The gas pipeline that is the horror of Russia that would run from Israel's vast supplies to Greece to make an alternative supply has been in fact stopped, as Donald Trump has put the squeeze on the oil companies like Nobel involved in that. So what you need to understand is that it was Manafort who has taken these proposals to the Russians. It is them who bought, it is he who brought Donald Trump into the fold, and it's he who's now convicted and facing state charges. And now the bodies are starting to pile up. Okay, we're talking about extremely wealthy people. Okay, we're talking. The Trump investigation is now centering on very important high-up people who are in the aluminum business, in the natural gas business, partners with Vladimir Putin, who've had money that has flown into the Trump campaign, into the Trump cover-up of his nefarious dealings, money that has flown for payoffs and bribes, money that was used to fund the campaign, to fund the Russian dirty tricks, Cambridge Analytica, which was run by our good friend Mr. Bannon. And all of this is now about to come out. And Donald Trump knows it. Now, you might know that Donald Trump started this crazy shit with Canada. Canada is our best trade partner ever. We got the world's largest open border between the two countries. No military posts on it. You have got our biggest trading partner. And you've got the only country on the earth that we maintain a balance of trade surplus. And Donald Trump is trashing them. Why? He has got to get the heat off. You understand this is game, set, and match. We now have the collusion with the Russians. We now understand when they say, well, Manafort was just Ukraine, had nothing to do with Donald Trump. No, 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 no. That Ukrainian money had now found out and influence and favors flew directly into Donald Trump's campaign. And now the people involved in this are starting to die. The WikiLeaks webmaster, who was the man who was posting the documents from the Russians on the website, is now disappeared and presumed dead. The commander, who was the guy who wanted to be the Russian president of the new Ukraine under Russian influence, has seen himself blown to pieces. Now, all of a sudden, the bodies are starting to pop up. People are starting to disappear. And this is all a result of the Mueller successful prosecution of Manafort. And this is all as a result of the inside testimony of Manafort's partner, Gates, who has established a connection between the Trump campaign and between the Ukraine and between money and favors and influence spent. How do you like that? Welcome to the Twilight Zone. Welcome to some obscure events that didn't make any sense, putting the whole puzzle together. It wasn't just the Cambridge Analytical. It wasn't just the votes. It was the cash. It was the money. It was the influence. It was the bribes. It was the intimidation. It was moving Donald Trump to be the best friend Putin ever had. It was about Donald Trump being Putin's boy to make the Ukrainian sanctions go away and to facilitate further excursions into Eastern Europe. Now, the reality is that Putin is making massive armament into those areas. He is ready to go into the Balkans. He's ready to go into all the former states, okay? He has a plan for each section. He's affecting their elections. He is involved in their economies. He is dirty tricking like you've never seen before. Soon, this is going to come into an incredible crisis they haven't seen. Remember, Donald Trump's been trashing the NATO alliance. Donald Trump has pretty much admitted that the U.S. has no intention of supplying troops and that the NATO alliance is going apart. You heard about this stuff going on all around the world, right? You heard about Donald Trump talk about NATO people not doing their part. You heard about the Polish saying, hey, we'll pay double. Why? Poland's next on the hit list, okay? And the others, you've heard about Turkey. The currency's collapsing. Their economy's falling apart. Donald Trump is trashing him. And their good friend Putin's there. And remember, they're part of the NATO alliance. And they're about to fall. So as you put these pieces together, you can understand that this is a very fragile situation, and a very corrupt Donald Trump is doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin, and the bodies are stacking up. The information's out, and now you understand why the FBI spied on him, why the FBI was so aggressive, and rightly so, why Donald Trump hates the intelligence agencies. You know why Donald Trump's trashing the intelligence agencies? Because he knows they know the truth, and he knows they've got the proof. And Donald Trump's one thing in life between now and the midterm elections is to stop this investigation, to discredit it, to see these reports never see the light of day, because if they do, they will bring down the Trump presidency, and he damn well knows it. And that is why this thing is getting uglier by the day, and that is why more and more people are absolutely livid about this thing, and that is why this is going to be a huge crack-up at the end of the runway. Understand that, and you understand where the elections are going. Understand that, and you'll understand why Trump is so crazy. Understand that, and you'll understand this crazy shit with the entire war on imports and exports from foreign trade. This is all about Donald Trump keeping the heat on. This is all about Donald Trump keeping it out of the news. This is all about Donald Trump saving his ass, because if he loses the House, he's going to get impeached. Just the House. The Senate, there are enough Republicans that are getting sick and tired and disgusted about this. And Donald Trump has got to have a huge show of power. The only thing that keeps Donald Trump in power at the present time, the only thing that's stopping this, very simply this. Republicans are scared to death of Donald Trump. They're facing election, and they're afraid that Donald Trump will smash them, attack them, use his Twitter file, and they can't afford to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. Understand that, and you understand everything you're saying. Understand that, and you understand how dangerous a time this is. Donald Trump's presidency is coming unglued. These prosecutions you've heard about, these witnesses that are testifying against him, people very close to the president, they know where the bodies are buried, and so does Putin. It's only a matter of time before this comes apart, and you need to be ready for it.